Great. Okay. I just want to, did everybody get the 2 sheets?
Yeah.
Right. On one sheet is a list of the topics that we're going to be covering. Extra. Read all. Basically, I call this on the tip of our tongue, that without being aware of it, on the tip of our tongue are expressions that we think are native English, but really entered the language through English translations of the Hebrew Bible. And so the list that you have is by no means exhaustive. And I'll never get through all of these today, I doubt it, but if you like the kind of thing we're doing, I've always been intrigued by origins. Where do things come from? That's, not everybody's crazy about that, but I am, and I'm sure some of you are. So if you like the kind of thing we do today, we'll arrange a part 2. Because I'll never get through all of this, and I've got pages more yet. So let me just begin with a little bit of historical introduction. With the Renaissance, in the 16th century beginning, you have an interest in the study of the ancient classics. That usually meant Greek and Latin classics, but Hebrew as well. Then, so the texts became available for study. In the Reformation, an important change took place, and that is translating the Bible into the vernacular, and in this case, into English. That wasn't as simple a thing as one might imagine. The church used the Latin translation of the Hebrew Bible by St. Jerome from the 300s, 400s, and that's the one they used, and that's the one they wanted to be used. Hello. And the problem is this: you have simple people who are not Latin scholars who want to read the Bible, and you have, on the other hand, the church very interested that if you want to know what's in the Bible, the priest will tell you. The priest will tell you. You don't need to read it for yourself. And so if you just, on a fine day, decide to translate the Bible into English, you could get yourself executed. Yeah. Well, that changed. One of the things that facilitated these English translations of the Hebrew Bible was the development of the Gutenberg press movable type. And you didn't need a monk sitting there laboriously by hand copying a translation. You had it, you could print it out and then change the type and print the next page and print the next page. It had a tremendous effect on everything. It was the Gutenberg, that was in 1455. And that changed the world very much. In the 1500s, you had 1, 2, 3, 4 very influential English translations. Some of them had to be done in Switzerland, because if they were done in England, you'd be in big trouble. So they were done in Switzerland, which was more, in Geneva, which was more liberal. Shakespeare used, when he would quote from the Hebrew Bible, 2 that were done in the 1500s. One's called the Bishop's Bible, and one's called the Geneva Bible. And those are the ones he used. But in 1611, King James set up, who was James the First of England, but James the Sixth of Scotland. Yeah, remember? He set up a committee. Put your glasses on, Murray. Good. Of about 54 scholars, some say 47. And they worked as a committee translating the Bible. And it is the King James translation reads like poetry in its own right. Even when it's not translating poetry, it has exquisite rhythmic cadences. It's really a beautiful piece of literature. And for its day, pretty accurate in translating the Hebrew. A student once asked me, I used to tell them, you have to bring a Bible to class so we can study. He says, well, is it all right if I bring the King James translation? I said, yes, but you have to promise to use a 17th century vacuum cleaner when you clean your house. If you'll do that, and I encouraged her to bring it, and she did very well with it. So we have the most, in 1611, the most famous of these English translations, the King James Version, and it was the most widespread. By that time, the opposition to translating the Bible into English had kind of cooled down, and it was so beautiful that it had that going for it. And most of the Hebrew expressions that came into English came via the King James translation. And of the two sheets you received, one is a list of the terms, the idioms, the expressions we're going to talk about today. I'll never get through the whole thing, but we set the bar high. We don't always reach it. Let's hear about that little bird told me. When do you say a little bird told me? When do you say it? When you don't want people to know who told you, you say, a little bird told me. But it has a long history, that talkative bird. It wasn't even a parrot or a minor bird, but they still talk. There's an incredibly good story. I'll tell you this story. It's in the Canterbury Tales. No, it's in the 1001 Nights, the Arabian Nights, and it's a story that a man went out of town and he wanted to make sure that his wife was faithful. So he bought a bird that listened, understood, and could squeal. Thank you very much. That's, is this vodka made from potato skins or from wheat?
It's potato skins.
With a little Naya fat. Yes.
You want vodka?
Thank you very much. So he bought this, oh yes, he bought this bird. You want to make that away? Okay. Very good. He bought this bird, and sure enough, when he came back to town, the bird said, you know, there were 4 or 5 guys up here, and she wasn't married to any of them, you know, and right. He was, of course, furious. He went out of town again, and this time, the wife, who was no dummy, decided she'll fix this bird. So what she did was she had friends of hers come and put a sheet over the cage and a grinder to make loud grinding sounds like thunder, and it had candles going back and forth so it looked like lightning. The man came home and asked the bird, knew what happened here in my absence. Who would know there was such a storm last night? A thunderstorm, lightning, everything. Who could tell what went on? He said, I know there was no storm. You are a liar. And so he got rid of the bird. But of course the bird was entirely innocent. Anyway, a little bird told me the underlying image comes from the book of Ecclesiastes, which in Hebrew is called Kohelet. They translate that the preacher, the assembler. Ecclesiastes. And here's the advice of Ecclesiastes, how to get through this life alive. Don't speak slightingly of a king, even among your close friends, and don't speak slightingly of the rich, even in your own bedroom. For a bird of the sky will carry the voice, and one with wings will tell of the matter. Remember the old gangster movies where if you squeal, they said, oh, he was singing. A canary. Well, this is, the book of Kohelet was probably written somewhere between 500, 400 before the Common Era. So this is a pretty good pedigree. Now there's a book that's not in the Bible, but was on the bestseller list in the Near East for like 1,500 years. We don't have any books like that today. It's called the Book of Achikar. And the story of Achikar, our earliest copy of it, is on an Aramaic papyrus, and it was for popular reading. It wasn't the Bible. It was for popular reading. And where did they find it? On an island in the Nile, right in the middle of the river there, called Elephantini. And who lived there? It was a Jewish military colony that were mercenaries in the employ of the Persian king to keep an eye on what Egypt's doing. And this was their reading for pleasure. There are translations of the Achikar. The Aramaic is our earliest, into Armenian, Slavonic. These are ancient translations. Slavonic is Old Church Russian. Syriac, that's an Aramaic dialect. Arabic, Greek, Turkish, even Romanian. It was everywhere. And it's a story of a courtier to a king, an Assyrian king. Achikar was not Assyrian, he was Aramean. And he was a counselor, a wise counselor. And the king depended on him for good advice. But Achikar said, look, I'm getting old. I don't have a son. Who's going to take over from me? Who's going to give you good advice? So Achikar adopted his nephew as his son and proceeded to teach him wisdom. And you have a whole bunch of little proverbs. One of them is, above all watchfulness, watch your mouth, for a word is a bird, and one who releases it is without sense. Again, this image, the way things are communicated is a bird hears it, a bird flies to somebody else and tells what they heard. That's the image. And so it's a very old a very old notion a little bird told me, and it's been around from, let's say, at least 500 from before the Common Era, and we still use it today. A little bird told me. How about the apple of one's eye? Who's the apple of your eye? Well, I'm not getting personal. What does it mean when you call someone the apple of your eye? Your favorite, your pet, right? Your dearest. Now, we get apple of one's eye in all the English translations in the 1500s, and then finally in the King James, 1611. The expression apple of one's eye refers to the pupil of one's eye, the vital and especially vulnerable part of the eye, which must be protected from injury, and it is protected. The eye is in a socket, and it's as if the whites of the eye are surrounding and protecting the iris, the colored pupil. Your eyebrows and your eyelashes are there to protect the eye. And so the eye is treasured and is taken very good care of. And Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Torah, tells us, God circled around Israel like a bird circles around the nest to protect the little birdies inside, guarding Israel like the pupil of his eye. Book of Proverbs, observe my commandments scrupulously, that you may live, says God. As for my teaching, treat it like the pupil of your eye. Treasure it and protect it. Now, where did apple come from? The word apple is not in the Hebrew text. That's an innovation of your translator. And why? The pupil is round. And so the thing that it suggested to the translator was an apple. So that's why apple got in here, not because of the Hebrew at all. The Hebrew that's used there is a word, ishon. And ishon means like a miniature man, a miniature person. And later it uses bava. In modern Hebrew, a buba is a doll. A little, I had a professor. He didn't know Egyptian, and he was self-conscious about it. So whenever he had to talk about Egyptian, he would refer to it as the Kleine Menschelach, the little hieroglyphics, the little man on the page, as a little put-down. Anyway, what is this little doll, this little miniature person that is the term that's used instead of apple? If you have nice, clear, moist eyes, and you stand in front of the pupil of somebody else's eye, if the lighting is right, you can see your reflection, but in a miniaturized form. So it's as if there's a little guy inside the eye. And you say, gee, that's kind of weird. It's not so strange. What about the English word pupil? It comes from the Latin pupilla, which means a little girl or a little boy, a doll. And even the English word pupil. So the translators knew that they're talking about the pupil. But they use the word little person because that's what pupil means in Latin. Okay. Now, it comes into Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's Dream. You remember Cupid with his bow and arrow? Flower of this purple dye, hit with Cupid's archer eye. Sink in apple of his eye, when his love he doth espy. Let her shine as gloriously as Venus in the sky. If this love filter, this aphrodisiac, right, is put into your eye when you look at your beloved, as good as the beloved looks, it makes you look even better. So it sort of helps the affair. So apple is not in the Hebrew. It was translated apple of the eye, meaning pupil of the eye, which means little doll, and the word in Hebrew is for little doll, little person. That's why we say the apple of one's eye. To move to a less happy subject, to be at death's door. I had a friend who wouldn't use that expression. She insisted upon saying, I got one foot in the grave. Was the way she would phrase it. But at death's door means the same thing. You feel like your death is imminent. You're going to die at any minute. You're right at the door of death. What do you mean death's door? Since when does death have a door? Well, there's a story there. The verge of dying literally means at the entrance to death's realm. Death's realm in the Hebrew Bible is called Sheol. It's the netherworld. It has nothing to do with hell as a place of punishment. It's just that everybody ends up there. It's the common grave of humanity. When you die, we all go to Sheol. The belief in hell and heaven is not in the Bible. That's post-biblical. In any event, the word death, Hebrew mavet, was the name of a major Canaanite god, Mot, who wages a never-ending battle against Baal, the god Baal, in a contest between what Baal brings, he's a storm god, he brings rain, and Mot, who's the god of death, like Hebrew Mavet, he brings drought. So drought versus rain, life versus death. Mot is an important antagonist to one of the most important gods in the Canaanite pantheon. Remember, the Canaanites was the culture that preceded Israel in what became Israel. Now, in the Hebrew Bible, you're not going to retain the idea that death is an independent deity, independent of God, because that goes against monotheism. It's also pagan mythology, so you're not going to have that. But something remains. Death is personified in the poetry of the Hebrew Bible, treated like a character, a personage, not divine, not a deity, but a personage. And so you speak of death as if death were a person. He's personified, and he is the proprietor of his own gated kingdom, which is the netherworld. He's in charge down there. Psalm 49, like sheep, humanity is put in Sheol, and death is their shepherd. The sheep that go down there have death, Mot, once a god, now just a character in lore, in folklore. How about Jeremiah during the threat of divine punishment because of what the people are doing and not doing, Jeremiah says, death has entered through our windows. It's as if the figure of death came in. Of course, what it's saying is death is all around and there's no escape. And if he comes through your bedroom window where you thought you'd be safe, you're wrong. Listen to the prophet Habakkuk, not one of the big prophets that everybody knows by name, but a very important prophet in terms of his poetry. Sheol opens its gullet wide, and like death, the figure of death is never sated. We do the same thing when we talk about the Grim Reaper. We're talking about death in a folkloric way rather than as a deity. But he started off as a deity. And in ancient Canaanite poetry, death is described, talk about a big mouth, one lip to heaven, one lip to earth, and the tongue to the stars. Baal will enter his innards, into Mot's mouth he will descend. And it's not that easy to get him out of there either. That was the classical myth of Persephone, where you go down to the netherworld for a visit. You're not dead, but you can't get out of it. And the only way you get out of it, and this goes back to the earliest traditions of written literature, the Sumerians. And the Sumerians had this idea too, that the only way you're going to get Dumuzi, we call Tammuz, the only way you're ever going to get Dumuzi out of the netherworld, and he's a fertility god, so you need him on earth, otherwise you won't have good crops. The only way you get him out is if you send somebody as a replacement to hold this place down there. And so somebody does. And that's the only way you're going to get out of there. Now, this business of death's door, I've already hinted that the kingdom of death, Sheol, the netherworld, has gates. It has 7 gates. How do we know? From an ancient Sumerian poem called The Descent of Inanna, which is basically translated into Akkadian, which is Babylonian, Assyrian. It's a Semitic language. Sumerian isn't. God knows what it is. We still don't know where it came from. But the very first year you're in Akkadian 101, you read The Descent of Ishtar. And so we read The Descent of Ishtar. She wants to go down to visit her sister, Ereshkigal, who's the queen of the netherworld. Well, she wasn't really planning on how am I going to get out of there, but she goes down. And at every gate, every one of the 7 gates, there's a gatekeeper who demands that she remove an article she's wearing till she gets to the 7th gate and she's in her birthday suit. So her jewelry, her clothing, these are the rules of the netherworld. Well, okay, she goes through all 7 of the gates, and they are called the gates to the netherworld, and that is what comes into the Hebrew Bible. Death's door is the gates of death, the gates to the netherworld. So, Psalm 107, the appetite of the dying rejects all food as they approach Sha'arei Mavet, the gates of death. Now, from gates of death, you're not that far from death's door. And one of the early translations, 1535, translated the Hebrew gates of death into English death's door. Well, how did it get from there everywhere else to the point we use it even today? That song with the English translation Death's Door was incorporated into the Book of Common Prayer, which was the Siddur, the Siddur that was used in the Church of England. And it was widespread, and everyone read it. And everyone who read it knew that death, the person of death, had a kingdom that had gates, and there is such a thing as death's door. It comes into Shakespeare too. Henry VI, Part 3, Act 3, Scene 3. Well, that's easy to remember. A man's father on the verge of death is spoken of as nature brought him to the door of death. So, these things, if it's in Shakespeare and if it's in your prayer book, you're going to know it, you're going to use it, you're going to speak it. So, that's how that one came in. How about when you're at your wit's end? What does that mean? I'm at my wit's end. What does it mean? I've had it, yes, but amplify that a little bit. I'm at the end of my rope kind of thing.
You can't find any more.
Yes, I can't stand it because I can't stand still. Popeye used to say that. Well, it at wit's end really means something quite different. It means when you come to the end of your knowledge, your talent, your wisdom. And it's from the Psalms, which talks about sailors on a boat that's going in the storm, the sailors reel to and fro, Psalm 107. They stagger like a drunken man, and all of their skill is swallowed up. All of their navigational skill, all of their idea what to do at this point. And that was translated as they are at their wit's end. The Hebrew has, their wisdom is swallowed up. Well, there was a time when wit didn't mean humor, clever humor. Wit meant knowledge, wisdom. And in fact, wisdom was originally witsdom. The wit was part of the word. So when you come to the end of your skill, we use it, I've come to the end of my patience. And if I ever get my hands on that little brat, that's the way we used it. But the sailors who don't know what to do anymore, their wisdom is swallowed up, their wit is swallowed up. Swallowed up is a great verb to use because you're talking about the sea. And if you sink, you're swallowed up. Hi, Jordan. How are you doing? Good. You're not the guy over there. Sit wherever you'd like. Okay. So that's where we get at wit's end. Wit meant something different than it does now. Beelzebub. When W.C. Fields was at his wit's end, he would say, Godfrey Daniel, because he didn't want to say God Dan. So he'd say, Godfrey Daniel Beelzebub. Now, if you're a fan of W.C. Fields, as I am, and you've seen all his movies, you'd be familiar with the Beelzebub. Who is Beelzebub? He is the devil. And he is the prince of demons, Beelzebub. Now, the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, Ahaziah, fell down, became injured, and didn't know if he was ever going to return to health. So he told his messengers, go to the prophets of Beelzebub and ask, is the king going to survive this illness, this accident? Well, Elijah the prophet is told by God, intercept these messengers and give them what for? And Elijah tells them, is that there's no God in Israel, that you have to go to the Philistine city of Ekron to inquire of their God, the prophets of their God? You haven't got your God and divinely approved prophets that you have to go there? Now, Beelzebub, is the name given to a Canaanite god, and it's a title. It's not his name. Baal, of course, is the name, Lord, Master. Baal's, in Canaanite, he was called Baal Zevul, or Zabulu Baal. Baal Zevul. Changed the last letter in a nasty way, in a sarcastic way, from an L to a B. So you're not going to have Beelzebul, which means exalted Baal. A little too pagan for the Hebrew Bible. Exalted Baal. So they changed the last letter to a B, and Beelzebub means Lord of the Flies. Remember that great novel and movie? It's very short. Does it count as a novel?
Yes.
Yeah? Or a novella?
It's a novel.
It's a novel. Well, why would someone pick a title, Lord of the Flies, which is, biblically speaking, the mocking nickname given to Baal Zebub? We call him Baal Zebub. I knew I was going to say something. Why? Let's start this sentence. I don't know. Well, Baal Zebul is now Baal Zebub. He appears, Baal Zebul, I think, in that form, the original form, or Baal Zebub, is in Paradise Lost. You're something with which you're intimately familiar, Rabbi, Milton's Paradise Lost. He is considered one of the fallen angels. But what happens is when a god gets demoted, you don't get rid of him. You say, well, not a god, an angel, or a minor deity. But you never get rid of your gods entirely. They may come in handy one day. So Baal Zebul, exalted Baal, Baal Zebub, Lord of the Flies, and that's a little bit of biblical humor at the expense of Canaanite religion. Den of thieves. Den of thieves. I can define it for you. The servicing department of the car dealer where I got my car is called a den of thieves. Yes, a den of thieves. Most people, if you hear den of thieves, what do you think of? Open Sesame. The 1001 Nights, the Arabian Nights, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. They have their treasure in their hideout, and it's a den of thieves is a secluded hideout used by criminals. Now, how did it come into English? Did it come into English through the Arabian Nights? No, because the English reading public didn't have an English translation or version that they could read till 1700. And that's rather late as things go in the development of English. So we have to go back in time. The Hebrew text of Jeremiah chapter 7. Habayit shenikra Shmi alav hama'arat paritzim. Habayit shenikra Shmi alav is the house, the temple, called by my name, become a ma'arat paritzim, a cave of violent men, of robbers. That's where it comes from, because when this was translated, cave of violent men in King James translation became a den of robbers. And when in the New Testament Jeremiah is quoted, the same passage, chapter 7, the English comes out, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. So den of thieves is biblical, and that's where it starts off as a robber's cave, but in the fine English translations, you've got a den of thieves. Notice a den is not the room where your stereo is, your TV is, where you relax. A den is a lion's lair. It suggests that these robbers are predatory. That's why they have a den. And they probably like one of those big TVs, those flat ones that they have. But that's not in their den. In 1992, James B. Stewart wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning account of insider trading on Wall Street. And what do you think he called it? Den of Thieves. Den of Thieves. And more classically, the phrase appears in Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, which, loving opera, I always used to call him Caruso, but it's Crusoe. Okay. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. What a cheerful thought. Isaiah is telling his countrymen, go ahead, keep it up. Keep partying, folks. But it's going to be coming to an end pretty soon, like tomorrow we die. Isaiah 20, chapter 22. Here it is, jubilation and joy, slaughtering cattle and butchering sheep, eating of meat and drinking wine, and saying, eat and drink. And they don't even realize the seriousness of it. They continue, for tomorrow we die. They're not going to interrupt their good time with overly dwelling on the end of the sentence. They're going to concentrate on the eat, drink, and merry part of the sentence. You remember Kohelet, Ecclesiastes? He's a very pessimistic, negative, and depressing author in the Bible. The Bible is not like that. And this book of Ecclesiastes stands out as, gee, where did he come from? Got all on the wrong side of the bed. I was assigned to teach a course in rotation. Job, Ecclesiastes, and the Human Predicament at Hunter College. And I always managed to stretch Job so I wouldn't have to teach Ecclesiastes. I'd give them Ecclesiastes on their final, and they would have to read it at home and do things with it, so they learned it. But I wasn't going to teach it. And I told them why. If I read that book before coming to class, I'm not going to get out of bed. Why should I? Everything is nothing. Everything is worth nothing. Everything you do is futile. And with some of the students I had, I could agree. It was a futile task that I had. All right. But Ecclesiastes says, I've come to have a high regard for enjoyment. The best a person can do in this life, the best you can do, is to eat, drink, and have joy. For this goes together with whatever gains he has made during the life God has given him under the sun on earth. And that phrase, under the sun, of course, comes from Ecclesiastes. Well, he's saying, not you're going to die, but that's it, folks. That's the best you're ever going to get. So, have that corned beef sandwich. Forget about the nitrates and the nitrates. Forget about the salt content. Forget about the fat. Corned beef can kill you 3 different ways and also make you very happy. You might as well, because that's the best there is. There's nothing better. A good meal. He is really a negative note. The only truly negative note in the Hebrew Bible, sustained negative note. And somebody added a verse at the very end of the book saying, well, the best of wisdom and the best is to fear God and be pious. Well, that's not his real message. His real message is, in the Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, we find the precursor to this discussion of the good life, with the first half telling you how to enjoy yourself, like we need to be told, and the second half of the statement, which is more sobering. So the Gilgamesh epic, Gilgamesh is searching for eternal life. And he goes into a tavern, and like so many after him, he seeks advice from the bartender. The bartender happens to be a minor deity, but to this day, flesh and blood bartenders can give you all sorts of advice. So she says to him, what are you doing? You'll never get eternal life. And why? Stop trying. When the gods created mankind, they appointed death for them, but kept eternal life in their own hands. So, Gilgamesh, let your belly be full. Enjoy yourself both day and night. Make merry each day. Dance and play day and night. Let your clothes be clean, your head be washed and bathed in water. Gaze on the child who holds your hand. Enjoy your kids. Let your wife enjoy your repeated embrace. Enjoy your loving wife, for that is the lot of humankind, not immortality. Now, what, in a later period, an Egyptian harpist sang a song of the good life and has left it in writing for us. And it's very similar to what Isaiah was saying, what even our negative friend Ecclesiastes was saying, and what Gilgamesh was saying, what they're all saying. Put myrrh on your head, dress in fine linen, anoint yourself richly, heap up your joys, let your heart not sink, make holiday, don't tire of it. And now here comes the cold shower. No one takes all of his goods with him. Can't take it with you. And no one who departs ever comes back. In Sumerian and in Babylonian, the way you talk about the netherworld is the land of no return. One-way ticket, folks. That's it. That's the cold shower. There are wonderful times you can have, but usually when that advice is given, the sort of tail end curtails the merriment. What does it mean when you have, or when someone has, feet of clay? Feet of clay.
They're not perfect. They're not perfect.
They're not perfect. Good. It's usually said about someone you idolize, and there couldn't be anything imperfect. But there are always those feet of clay, and therein lies the imperfection. In the court of Nebuchadnezzar is a counselor who was a Judean exile, and his name is Daniel. And he advises the king. And the king had a dream. He dreamt of a statue whose head was of fine gold, while its chest and arms, notice we're heading down, the chest and arms were of silver, its belly and thighs were of bronze, the legs were of iron, and as each metal is in descending order of worth, and the feet are part iron and part clay. A stone struck the statue's feet and crushed them, and then the rest of the statue crumbled to the ground because the feet it was resting on could no longer support it. Well, what the dream was saying is there's going to be a succession of kingdoms after you, Nebuchadnezzar, and each one is going to be of a lesser empire, of a lesser glory, and boom, 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 it's only going to get less good as time goes on. But the real message is that, you know, when Alexander conquered most of the known world, and certainly the Near East in 333 before the Common Era, and when he died at a very young age, he left his empire to his generals. Syria, Lebanon, northern part of Israel, that was given to Seleucus. Egypt and the southern part of what today is Israel was given to Ptolemy. Now, what is hinted here is that Alexander's empire is going to be a fine empire, strong, until it divides. And when it divides, one half iron, one half clay, the vulnerable part is going to bring the whole kit and caboodle down. And that's a feat of clay. There's in Oscar Wilde's The Portrait of Dorian Gray, it is the feet of clay that make the gold of the image precious. But you know it's not going to last forever, and you know it's so vulnerable, and the gold isn't. So, but because you have feet of clay, you treasure all the more the gold, which is not like clay, is precious. Feet of clay. And when you idolize someone, it's really a crushing blow when you discover their feet of clay. Yeah.
Murray,
What?
about 75 years ago, I heard a sports announcer use that expression, feet of clay. There was a catcher for the New York Giants, Ernie Lombardi.
Yeah?
He was the slowest runner, but he was a power hitter. And if he would hit the ball to the third baseman who was playing the outfield, the sports announcer on the radio would say Ernie Lombardi had feet of clay. He never made it to first base.
Well, that means he's got heavy feet.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, he's not going to win any races, yes. But the original meaning goes back to the dream of Nebuchadnezzar as brilliantly interpreted by the Judean Daniel. This was, of course, written by a Judean who makes his countrymen very clever indeed. How about the flesh pots of Egypt? Flesh pots. Well, originally, flesh pot meant just what it says. It's that big pot in which you're boiling your beef, or simmering is better. Your beef. That's the flesh pot, the meat pot. But things change. The Israelites complained, "You brought us to this wilderness, God. There's nothing to eat here. And you took us out of Egypt," which they seemed to forget they were slaves, "where we sat next to the flesh pot. We sat next to the pot with the meat in it. And it was nice and handy, and we could get at the food, and it was delicious. And you took us here?" Yeah. Now, in the early English translation of the verse in Exodus that I just paraphrased, the pot of meat was put into one word, flesh pot. Pot of flesh became flesh pot, and then pluralized flesh pots. And it came to have a different meaning altogether. Some people have an appetite for boiled beef. Some people have appetites for less mundane or gustatory things. The flesh pots of a given town is its red light district, where you go for an illegal good time. And the red light district, the flesh pot. Now, you know, we had it good. We had food. From food, one appetite, it switched to another appetite for physical pleasures. Yes. The flesh pots. How about from sea to sea? From sea to shining sea. In Psalm 72, the king, who is the king of Judah and therefore a descendant of King David, God promised David that his descendants would rule and would be the greatest thing since the Tootsie Roll. And so we have the blessing in Psalm 72. May he, the Davidic king, rule from sea to sea, Yam ad Yam, from river to the ends of the earth. From sea to sea means everything in between the two seas. In other words, the full extent of your territory, you will rule it. Well, who wrote Psalm 72, who is speaking, is really a court poet who works for the king and is going to say very nice things about the king. May the king rule from sea to sea. There is even a poem in the Psalms, a group called the Royal Psalms by scholars. Psalm 44 is a king's wedding song. And that got in there because who were the poets that wrote the devotional songs, the prayers? They were the same poets who wrote the love poetry, the flattery of the king. And so they were included. It means everywhere. If you say night and day, you mean all the time. If you say young and old, you mean everyone. If you say from sea to sea, the full extent of your boundaries. Now, in ancient Israel, they used to talk about the back sea and the front sea. What does it mean when you orient yourself or orientate yourself? What?
Position.
Adjust.
No, simply,
The east.
You adjust yourself.
that's what orientate means. But what does orient mean?
The east.
To figure out where you are.
Which that's not politically correct anymore, by the way. You have to say Asian, you can't say Oriental, because Oriental means east, which means you're defining a whole culture on the basis of where they're located from you. Like, you're the important one, not the very important one. So we say Asian. In the continent of Asia, we don't say Oriental anymore, which is very difficult because for years I taught in the Department of Classical and Oriental Studies at Hunter, and I guess nobody has said anything yet, but they will.
So what about Oriental?
Yeah.
I thought Oriental was to describe something that was not alive, like rugs and things from the Orient.
No, but they do make beautiful rugs. From China, you have wonderful silk rugs.
But that's Oriental.
Yeah, but that's not what it means. Orient simply means east.
Okay.
So why do you have the verb to orient yourself? Why? Because when you oriented yourself, you started off to find your bearings facing east. So east is in front of you. If east is in front of you, where is the north? To the left. And where is the south? To the right. So starting with that which is in front of you, which is the east, you can orient yourself in terms of the directions of the compass. The sea that's behind you, if you're facing east, is the Mediterranean. The sea that's in front of you, if you're an ancient Israelite, could be the Red Sea, could be the Gulf of the big Persian Gulf. Right. It could be, it could be the Dead Sea. I doubt it though, but it's the body of water that's to the east of you. And the body of water to the back of you is the most western body of water, and to an Israelite, the most western body of water is the Mediterranean. So from sea to sea means from the Mediterranean to any of these large bodies, Red Sea, Arabian Gulf, whatever, Persian Gulf. Now, the Assyrians and the Babylonians also thought of their territory in terms of two seas. One was the Mediterranean, that was the upper sea, and the lower sea was the Persian Gulf. So that was a convention that was used to describe the full extent of the boundary. Any Canadians here?
I was born there.
Oh, okay. Do you want to know what the national motto of Canada is? From sea to sea. From the Atlantic to the Pacific. From sea to sea. And that lives on there. I'm 5:15 now. And so I'm going to stop.
4.
Oh, 4:15? Well, isn't that when I'm supposed to stop?
Yes.
It is. Well, that clock, you see, they didn't change it. It's all right. But it's all right. What I am suggesting is, if you're interested in the origin of terms in English, or even names in English, I'll give another session. If you have genug, then we'll go to a different subject. What is your pleasure? A show of hands. You want another lecture on origins of names and words? So we will do. So we're going to talk to the lady who will make it happen. Thank you.
I promise you I'm going to check with
Speak up.
up loud. I think you can hear me. I promise you I'm going to check with Murray and his calendar. We will schedule a second part of this really interesting lecture. I can't thank you enough. I think we all are. I want to make an announcement as well. I want you to get all the questions you ever wanted to ask our wonderful rabbi on paper on December 25th, before you go to the Chinese restaurant. Come to Temple. We haven't determined the exact time yet, but more than likely early afternoon. And we are going to repeat what we did last year, which was ask the rabbi. I know you have a million questions because Rabbi brings up such interesting subjects all of the time. So come, we're going to publicize it. We should have a full house. Not going to go anyplace else on December 25th. Come here and be with us. And be on the lookout for the next date for Murray's
Part 2.
lecture. Part 2. And right now, come and have coffee, tea, something sweet, and enjoy with us. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for coming indeed. Thank you.